Well, I'm thrilled to be joined by Brenna Greene on today's episode. She may not be covering the Zags anymore, but we're going to talk to her about her few final months in Spokane, her conversations with Gonzaga's newcomers and returners, and we're going to touch on conference realignment and her new gig in Portland right here on the Locked On Zags podcast. Don't go away.
You are Locked On Zags, your daily podcast on the Gonzaga Bulldogs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is going on, y'all? Welcome to the Locked On Zags podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host and longtime Gonzaga podcaster, Andy Patton, here to bring you news and updates on all things Zag athletics. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thrilled as always to be joined today by Brenna Greene. Brenna just finished up her run as the sports director at KREM in Spokane, is in her first week at KOIN in Portland. I know a lot of Gonzaga fans out there are excited to hear and see you once again. Brenna, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I was very excited for you, obviously, when I heard that you were moving down to Portland. Selfishly, as somebody who is now in my media market, I'm excited about that. I know, obviously, you were somebody who went to Gonzaga, has had a lot of love for Spokane, so I'm kind of curious just what that kind of process was like, getting the opportunity to obviously go home, to go to a bigger market, but also have to leave somewhere that I know meant a lot to you.
Yeah, it was the most difficult decision I've ever made in my life, period. I mean, I definitely will always love Spokane. Will always have a soft spot for Spokane. And I mean, I don't think I'm going to necessarily be too much of a stranger just because I have so many connections up there still and stuff. Anyways, it was definitely a difficult decision, but it was one I needed to make for my career. It's hard to move on from a place like Spokane, especially one that I know so well and that, I kind of knew the lay of the land of, and had so many connections in and so many people who I loved and enjoyed. So.
This is probably not going to help your conflicting feelings about it, but I do really want to kind of ask about, have you reflect a little bit on your time in Spokane, and maybe talk about some of your favorite stories, or even if it's just like favorite part of the Spokane media market, or favorite teams, play any of that, whatever kind of comes to mind.
I mean, I think easily my favorite story that I did in Spokane was with, and it's not even because of the story, even though I did love the story, but the way that it all kind of came together at the end, I thought was one of the coolest things that happened to me in my career. I did a story with Jalen Suggs during the NCAA tournament last year about his connection with his friend who had died by suicide, and how he honored him, his friend Xavier, before every game by throwing up the X for him. And so I did a story with him, and I was so grateful and thankful that Jalen opened up to me about that. And it was just a story that really I connected a lot to, and I thought was really, really cool and special, and said a lot about Jalen as a human being. And so I think, honestly, like, standalone, that's probably my favorite story. But then you add in the fact that on NBA draft night, Jalen, on the inside of his coat, had a quote from the story in his jacket, on the inside of his jacket. And so, I looked at it and I was like, that was literally lifted directly from our website. And that was really cool to, kind of unknowingly contribute in a little small way that, I mean, Jalen has no idea that was so cool to me, obviously. But yeah, I think that just kind of shows, it kind of like, it was a moment that resonated with me. It's like, hey, like, what you do does matter and makes an impact. And so that was really cool because, without that story, that quote doesn't get in that jacket. And I don't know what they what they put in there instead. But
Right.
I just thought that was a really humbling, cool moment for me.
Absolutely. Well, and I know too, like with Gonzaga being, obviously where you went to school, like
Mhm.
you separate that when you're covering it.
Yes.
Like I
Oh
know that
yeah,
that's something
totally.
that I have to do, even though and it's not even nearly to the extent of being like on the news.
Yeah.
Um, but it must be cool to have been able to have an impact on somebody like
Yes.
Jalen from your alma mater too. Like that's got to play a part in it
I
in some capacity.
Yeah, I think that, for me, like I have so much of a deeper connection to my school
Hmm.
right now than anybody else
Yeah.
that was, in my class because I'm
Mhm.
around there all the time.
Yeah.
I know those guys that are playing out on the
Yeah.
court, and none of my classmates know Drew Timme. None of my
Right.
classmates have talked to
Hmm.
Julian Strawther.
Yeah.
And so I think that is just something that is really, really awesome for me,
Hmm.
and the fact that I know these kids that are playing out on the court, and I know who they are as human beings, or at least
Hmm.
on some level who they are, and
Right.
I think that that's just something that I um, really consider myself to be super lucky to have. And also, another thing is that so many people, once they graduate from Gonzaga, they never get back into the kennel again.
Yeah.
I got to go to the kennel for 4 straight years, even when nobody else was allowed in there in
Hmm.
2020 and 2021. I was there. I got to watch that team in person when the vast majority of people never got to watch that team in person.
Yeah.
I got to see like the the two biggest kennel games in the kennel in Gonzaga history between North Carolina and Texas.
Yeah.
And I'm just, I mean, I guess you could probably throw Michigan State in there too, but that's when I was a student, so I got to see that too. Didn't go so well. But anyways, so yeah, that's just something that I never took for granted every time I got to step in there, because I knew how lucky I was compared to so many other people who are never going to be able to be in that building.
I have to imagine that you're going to have some similar experiences now in Portland. Obviously,
Hmm.
you grew up a Blazers fan. You've talked a lot about that. You posted that
Hmm.
great video of you being on KOIN when you were a kid,
Yeah.
talking about the Blazers, and to kind of circle back to that. I mean, I have to imagine that there's probably not a whole lot of places in the world that would have pulled you from Spokane, but
Yes.
getting the opportunity to be back in Portland in a bigger market, but also a market that's got a lot going for it right now. The Blazers are, they got a lot of drama right now, certainly with some of the front office stuff and
Yeah.
the sale
Hmm.
potentially, which is, I can't imagine, the most fun stuff to cover. But you got that. You got the Timbers
Interesting.
just got a big
Very least.
win. Like there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening in Portland. So I got to imagine the excitement level for you, not only coming home, but getting to be in an area where there's kind of a lot of stuff going on, has got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, in terms of local television, this is pretty much the only job I would have considered going to
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
It was this one or trying to pursue something, regionally or nationally.
Mhm.
And those goals still exist, but this was
Sure.
the one where it made a lot of sense to come here to this station. And I'm just, yeah, like I said, it was going to take a really, really special place for me to leave Spokane, and I'm
Mhm.
really lucky to have found a place like that.
How I know you just started, but
Yeah,
how have the first couple of days gone? How is kind of getting back into the rhythm
yeah,
of being in a different city? I'm asking selfishly because I'm going to be, watching KOIN and checking it out, so I'm
yeah,
excited to see kind of how that goes.
yeah. No, I mean, what, I'm on day 3 here. Um, So, like the first like few, I think the first like honestly, like I think it's like the first like 2 to maybe 3 weeks is like disorienting in a way
Sure.
every time, because you're just learning everything and you're like, oh, am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? Am I standing in the
Mhm.
right place? Am I, do I know how to use this program?
Right.
Do I know how to use that program? So it's, kind of figuring that out. So yeah, so that's, it's been a lot of my
Mhm.
first 3 days is trying to
Sure.
figure stuff out. I just actually anchored my first sportscast, so that was cool.
Yeah.
And but, honestly, anchoring is like the easiest thing, because it doesn't you being on camera doesn't change no
Yep.
matter where you go. It's
Sure.
That's on you. That's not about the station. That's who you are.
Mhm.
There's obviously different quirks and everything, and so you work through those quirks. But yeah, I mean, I you know, I think tomorrow I'm going down to So, I mean, when people listen to this, I'm assuming that
Mhm.
whenever the people listen to this, I'm going to the World Track and Field Championships, World Athletic Championships a few times over the next week. So I'm excited about that. And yeah, just kind of dipping my toes in and figuring everything out. And it'll take a little bit to get comfortable and kind of find who I am in this place, but I am I think it's a really important skill to be able to go places and
Yeah.
put yourself out there and try new things. And so I'm like, all right, it's time again. So, and thankfully I'm going to a place where it's not like I'm coming in here and I'm like totally green. It's not like I'm going to like Pittsburgh or something where it's
Right.
like, I know nothing, you know what I mean? That's not what I'm doing. So, so thankfully I'm going to a place where there's no foreign concepts here. There's just kind of, figuring out your path in it.
All right, well, Brenna and I are going to come back in the second segment, and we're going to talk about those Gonzaga Bulldogs. We're going to talk about the last couple of conversations that Brenna was able to have with some of the returners, with some of the newcomers on the team. We're going to talk Malachi Smith, Efton, Reid. But before we do that, I want to tell you all about BetOnline. College basketball may be deep into the offseason, but the MLB, WNBA, and MLS seasons are heating up into the summer months. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports information. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. They have lines for coaching changes across every major sport, so even in the offseason, you can get your fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, segment 2, still Andy Patton, still Locked On Zags, still chatting with Brenna Greene of KOIN News in Portland. Brenna, I want to talk Zags now. It is Locked On Zags after all. We should probably talk a little bit about those Gonzaga Bulldogs. I know you had a chance to speak to Gonzaga's 3 surprise returners, or at least surprised that all 3 of them came back. Rasir Bolton, Julian Strawther, and Timme all obviously making a decision to come back to Spokane for another year. I'm kind of just curious in your conversations with them, if there was kind of any commonalities you noticed, any like reasons that they maybe all kind of decided to come back, or if it was just kind of fluky in a way, or kind of what read you got on that.
I think they all just didn't feel finished.
Yeah.
They didn't feel like they were finished in Spokane. Rasir, he just kind of started making an impact on the community there.
Yeah.
And so I think that was something that was kind of pulling him back a little bit. Julian, I think that he's looking to take a bigger role on the team.
Yeah.
And so I think he didn't feel like he was quite finished with that. And Drew just loves Gonzaga.
Yeah.
So he was like, this feels like it's the right decision for me to be back here. And I just feel at home. So yeah, I just don't think they felt like they were quite ready to call it a day.
I was just going to say with Drew, he kind of talked about like it was literally a coin flip for him. Like he said he didn't mean to be the last person or one of the last people to pick, which I sort of believe him, but I'm also not 100% sure I believe him. Like I think at some point during that day, he was like, all right, I'm just going to wait till the end. Like I knowing him or knowing what I know about him, it feels like something he would do. But yeah, I mean, the fact that it was such a hard decision for 2 players in particular who probably would have gotten drafted, or at the very least would have gotten a very long look in the NBA. Julian, I think almost certainly would have been selected. And for them to obviously there are other factors at play with NIL and things like that maybe help make that decision a little bit easier. But it's just what an incredible kind of testament to the program and the staff and the development and the fans and everybody in Spokane to kind of make these 3 players who all could have had relatively lucrative professional careers right away, decide to come back to Spokane for another year. It's just a really cool thing that doesn't happen everywhere.
Yeah, no, totally. I think that the patented Zag community definitely played a part, and yeah, I'm really excited to watch this team this year.
Yeah,
really excited.
Oh man, it's going to be a blast. And we kind of talk about that Zag community, and it helped to get these 3 guys back, but it also almost certainly had a factor in getting 2 other guys to commit to Gonzaga out of the transfer portal. That's of course, Efton, Reid out of LSU, Malachi Smith out of Chattanooga. You had the opportunity to talk to both of them. You shared that audio with me, which I sincerely appreciate. It has been up on the Locked On Zags podcast, so people can check that out, previous episodes if they haven't already. But again, I'd kind of just love to hear your impression of getting a chance to talk to those two guys and kind of how, based on the personality and stuff, kind of how it seems like they're going to fit in Spokane.
Yeah, really enjoyed both of them. Malachi was super well spoken and just like really just like you got off of the call and you were like, I feel good. Like,
Yeah.
that's how you felt talking to Malachi. And I was like, all right, like that's awesome. And then Efton just he seems like he's kind of a big teddy bear, and he also kind of like marches to the beat of his own drum. And I appreciate that about him. So yeah, I'm excited to watch the two of them. And I think that they're gonna have I think that they're gonna endear themselves to fans pretty quickly. They both were guys who I think really are gonna take in this opportunity and appreciate it and savor it. And that's really special when people are able to do that.
One thing I kind of noticed a little bit in some of the conversations you've had with those guys and some of the other conversations that they've kind of had, and really a larger conversation about Gonzaga, is the ability to identify guys who are willing to kind of fight for their roles. And I think, one of the challenges that Gonzaga ran into early in the transfer portal season was the uncertainty surrounding Drew and Julian and everybody and Bolton, but specifically with Drew, like Gonzaga was out after some of the top tier big man transfers. Like they were in on those guys. And I have to assume that those guys weren't willing to commit to a school where they didn't know whether one of the best players in college basketball history was going to be on the team or not. And I don't blame those guys for making that decision, but Reid did. Like he was willing to do that. He was willing to come into a situation where, hey, maybe I'm going to be the starter and I'm going to play 25 minutes per night on a top 10 team, or maybe I'm going to be, maybe not. And he's obviously still, going to try his best to get into a situation where he plays a significant amount of minutes. And I'm sure he's going to have a role, but there's no doubt that his amount of playing time got cut significantly with Drew Timme and frankly with Julian returning to school. And so Gonzaga has done such a good job of just kind of identifying guys who seem willing to be in situations where, hey, maybe it's a development year, or maybe, I'm just going to spend this year learning from, a guy like Drew Timme, which can't hurt to get that opportunity. But I love Gonzaga's ability to seemingly find the kind of kids who really are willing to come in and fight and play their roles and don't need to be outside of their depth or their element. And it seems like they got two more really good ones here with Smith and Reid.
Yeah, definitely. It's they both seem like guys who are, they're like, look, we know we're gonna have to come in and fight for our roles and fight for our spots, and we're totally fine with that. And like you said, not super common in today's landscape to have that answer.
Yeah. And I think too, like we talk about the returners, we talk about the newcomers, but there's also guys like Nolan Hickman and Hunter Salas who are, coming into their sophomore years, maybe weren't anticipating as much competition for playing time as they're going to get. Neither of those two guys threw their name in the portal after finding out that Smith was coming or Bolton was here, which I think is a testament, or neither of them have seemed to show any displeasure. I want to touch on Hickman a little bit because it kind of ties into your time at KREM and your final story, which was a wonderful, wonderful story about Nolan Hickman and his brother. And I'd kind of love if you could, for people who maybe missed that, who aren't in the Spokane market, who didn't see it, I thought it was an awesome story, and I kind of want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I follow Nolan on Instagram and stuff, and so I just kept seeing him posting video after video with his little brother, and I thought it was so unique that he has a brother who's like 8 years old.
Yeah.
That's just like not many college athletes have a brother that's that young.
Yeah.
And you could just tell he like loved his brother. And Nolan is a pretty like cool, calm, and collected cat.
Yeah.
He doesn't like show a lot of emotion towards anything. And so to see him be so excited about his little brother, I was like, this would be a really good opportunity to like kind of show that side of him that doesn't necessarily come out, especially on the basketball court, I feel like. And so anyways, I'd talked to Gonzaga about doing the story few months ago, and it didn't work out. And then at Hoop Fest, the whole family was there. Like literally mom, dad, Nolan, little brother. I'm not sure if the sister was there or not. I think she might have been. But anyway, and I was like, yeah, we're going to do this. And so
Yeah.
I was like, well, I already talked to Gonzaga about, wanting to do this, and they seemed fine with it. And I get contact with them beforehand, but it didn't work out. But,
Mhm.
it was a good story. It was a nice story, and it was something that wasn't a total shock or surprise. So,
Yeah.
anyways, yeah, I was able to grab them and sit down with them, and that was super cool. And yeah, just really grateful to the Hickman family
Mhm.
for letting me do that. And yeah, it was really cool to see them be so excited and happy about it too. And it was little Noah's first interview. So there you go. I can hold that honor forever. Nobody can ever take that away from me. So,
Your last one in Spokane, his first one ever. That's a pretty fun story. I'll link to it in the
yeah,
show notes for anybody who missed it and
thank
wanted to
you.
take a look at it.
Yeah.
But Brenna, I wanted to switch gears on you a little bit. I wanted to talk about the big news in college sports, the news that, of course, happened while you were probably trying to wrap up the end of your time in a media market with a Pac-12 school. So, of course, as a nice little parting gift for you, USC and UCLA threw up their deuces and bounced out of the Pac-12, are heading over to the Big Ten. Pretty significant changes for college sports. Obviously, you probably focused more on the Washington State side of things, which is a bit more dire in their situation and a bit more immediate and how it's
hmm
going to impact them. But there's certainly been conversation about how this could impact. It's going to be a seismic shift in college sports potentially, and there's the possibility that it could impact Gonzaga. And I'm curious if you have any kind of thoughts on that, or guesses there, or uh, just
Yeah.
what the whirlwind was like when that news kind of came down.
First of all, that was the day I was moving out. I thankfully had moved all of like the items out of my apartment the day
Yeah.
before, but that was the day that I was moving like officially out of my apartment. So I'm literally like vacuuming, and I look down at my phone and I'm like, oh, something's happening. What's that? Oh no. Like, and it totally screwed up the rest of my week, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
this is very inside baseball, but I was going to use that day to work on the Nolan and
Oh
Noah
yeah.
Hickman story. And so then I had to move that to working on it on Friday. So I worked a double on Friday.
Ooh.
I worked until like 11 o'clock that night to get that story done, because I was like, my managers were like, are you sure? Like, you don't have to do this. I was like, no, I have to do this story. I have to do this story. And so anyways, yeah, so it totally screwed my whole week.
Yep.
And so anyways, yeah, like yeah, I mean, for Gonzaga, I think, yeah, you mentioned that obviously the situation's a little bit more dire for WSU, but
Mhm.
I mean, I think it's huge for Gonzaga. And I think the Pac-12 at this point is like kind of done with the trying to like not that they started, but they're not going to make any rash decisions
Yeah.
right now. They're not going to make any quick decisions. So, if I'm the Pac-12, they have got to get hmm, screw it. They got to get their heads out of their butts, and stop, acting
Yeah.
like stop this whole like we're a superior academic contest,
Yeah.
sorry, superior academic conference,
Mhm.
uh, because they need to start looking at their future and figuring out what makes the most sense. And
Yeah.
I definitely think for them, like, why at this point, now that you know that you're in this situation, why would you not approach Gonzaga
Mhm.
and be, and try to get, yeah, they don't have football,
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
Notre Dame doesn't have football and they belong to the ACC for all their other sports.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
So, I think that it would be a real, I think that it would be a real blunder if the Pac-12 didn't at least explore that option with GU. And obviously, it's not just going to be um, the Pac-12 coming after GU.
Mhm.
Those Big East rumors didn't come out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah. No, they did
Um,
not.
yeah, that was not something where it was like, oh, somebody just made this up and it was all over the internet. No, there was
Mhm.
there was stuff going on behind the scenes. So,
Yeah.
so anyways, it's going to be really interesting to watch Gonzaga over the next few years. I love the WCC, and
Mhm.
I love, but I think it would be a real mistake if Gonzaga ended up staying in it. I do.
Yeah, that's basically exactly where I'm at. Is like you have to see this through. You have to explore this. Like obviously the travel component has long been the sticking point, and
Hmm.
it's not an easy hurdle to clear, but it is far from an impossible hurdle to clear.
No.
And USC and UCLA are in different situations for a lot of reasons, hundreds of millions of reasons, frankly,
Hmm.
and they have abilities that Gonzaga doesn't necessarily have. And people are like, well, how is UCLA gonna move all their other sports? Like, yeah, they can do that. That's not hard for them to do. It's more challenging for Gonzaga to do, but also
Hmm.
not impossible. And I don't. A lot of people have reached out to me, and one of the questions that they asked me is like, well, why doesn't Gonzaga just only move basketball? And just leave the rest of the sports in the
Oh my
WCC.
gosh.
And the WC, like, I don't know what your read here is, but I don't know why the WCC would agree. Like, they would
No,
have to
they would
say yes
never.
to that. They're not going to do
No,
that.
they're not doing that.
Okay. Well, hopefully, if
Like,
people are listening, they can stop asking me that question because I
yeah,
kind of
no,
said
that
that
would,
like
I
six
mean, the WCC would be like, why would we do that? And that's,
Yeah.
that's the
Mhm.
biggest sticking point. Like, it's not like the Pac-12 is going to be like, oh yeah, sure, you
Mhm.
can have, I'm just throwing out a random sport like
Mhm.
women's cross country run in the Pac-12.
Right.
That's just not,
Yeah.
they're not going to agree to that either. So,
Right.
that's why that's a huge issue. And it's not like you're going to go have everybody else go play
Mhm.
in the Big Sky. Like, that's not gonna work either. So
Yeah.
that's the biggest difficulty that Gonzaga
Yeah.
has,
That's the
in
biggest
terms
hurdle.
in terms of the Big East anyways.
Mhm.
All those concerns go out the window if it's Pac-12.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. I've heard the Big Sky one too, and I was like, I can't imagine
no,
having worked in higher
then
education, worked in college athletics. I could not imagine Chris Standiford going to all of his other coaches and saying, "So you're all going to
nope.
go to the Big Sky?" Like, could you
He
imagine
wouldn't do
going to
that
the
either.
Big
From
12?
from from what I've heard, he's very, like, conscientious of the other sports,
Yeah.
and he doesn't wanna he and if he has to move basketball, he will
Mhm.
do his best to not, mess up other sports in that process.
Yeah, which is the correct way to handle it.
Yes.
And obviously, like, no AD wants to rock the boat, but especially when you're a relatively new AD, and with Gonzaga's
Mhm.
other sports having a lot of success, like to do
What a
anything that would
first year
jeopardize.
for him,
Yeah, I know,
by the
right?
way.
Yeah,
What a
yeah,
Mike Roth is like, "Hot diggity dog, I got out at the right time. Thank you."
yeah. I know, to have to navigate the NIL, to navigate
Mhm.
the portal stuff, to navigate a couple of bad decisions from some coaches, to
Mhm.
navigate all of these the conference
Stockton?
realignment. I mean, yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's been a he's probably aged more than 1 year in the last year, I would
I think that'd be
imagine.
fair to say.
Yeah. No doubt. So the last question I wanted to ask you, kind of sticking on the realignment thing, you kind of already touched
Mhm.
on it a little bit,
Yeah.
but I can ask you questions now as a Zag fan, more so
Okay.
than a
Yes.
media member. So I was
Yeah,
curious
totally.
what you want to see Gonzaga do. Like, we
Yeah.
know the ins and outs, we know some of the sticking points, but if you had a choice as somebody who watches this team as a fan, like,
Yeah.
what would you want to see them do?
To be honest, I'd answer this question as a media member anyways, because
Probably.
I think that part of being in the media sometimes is offering your opinion about
Hmm.
things, and
Hmm.
I shy away from that. Sometimes people didn't like that, but that's
Yeah.
okay. So, but yeah, I mean, like, selfishly, I'd love for them to go to the Pac-12 because
Yeah.
then, you're keeping the Zags on the West Coast. They're still going to get some pretty good basketball games,
Hmm.
and and it makes sense for everybody involved the
Hmm.
most. It
Yeah.
does. Realistically, I think they're going to go to the Big East.
Yeah.
Um, and you know who what really who I mean, obviously the athletes lose out a little bit going to the Big East, but who really loses out if they go to the Big East is the fans.
Yeah.
Like, you've got tip times that are going to be at 3 o'clock on some days, West Coast time,
Hmm.
like maybe even earlier than that. Like,
Hmm.
trying to figure out what network everything is on. Not that, like,
Yeah.
everything's perfect on that end right now either, but like, it's that there's still just like there's so many adjustments and things, and like, it's not like, Gonzaga is going to play at Portland again for the first time in like
Yeah.
2 or 3 years this year,
Mhm.
which I'm very excited about. And and
Me too.
yeah, I'm sure you are. And so, like, there's so many, a lot of Gonzaga alums live up and down the West Coast in places like San Diego, San Francisco,
Yeah.
Portland.
Mhm.
And so now you're going to lose out on those opportunities to go see
Yeah.
Gonzaga games because they're going to be over in Philadelphia
Yeah.
and, Washington, D.C. and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And so and as I mentioned, it's really hard to get into the kennel.
Yeah.
So it's not like it's an option for fans to go buy a seat in the kennel. It's not an option.
Yeah.
So if, Gonzaga does go to the Big East, like basically you're either going to have to plan a trip to go see them or you're going to have to hope and pray that they're playing a non-conference game in your hometown.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing that has me the most conflicted about the Big East is that the people who really lose out in that situation are the fans.
Absolutely. Brenna, thank you so much, not just for coming on the show today, but for coming on the show multiple times over the last couple of years, for sharing content, all of that. I really appreciate it. The Spokane media market, I know, is going to miss you. I can speak from personal experience, but also I feel comfortable speaking for the Gonzaga fan base that we're going to be sad to see you go, but obviously excited for you and your future in Portland.
Yeah. And I just want to say, like Zag Twitter was like a highlight of my 4 years in Spokane.
Yeah.
Obviously, as every fan base is on Twitter, there can be volatile moments.
Oh,
There
yeah.
can be ups and downs. But for whatever reason, I really felt like embraced by that Twitter. And I won't be a stranger, by the way. Obviously, like Gonzaga's gonna play down here for the PK85, so I will definitely be covering them then. They'll play down here again against Portland. I would be shocked if I'm not in Las Vegas for the WCC tournament. I'm going to try to make that one happen. And my best friend from Gonzaga lives in Austin. So trip may be on the docket there. So anyways, yeah, I'm just I definitely plan to still be around this team a fair amount next year, and that kind of made the transition a little easier too. I'm not gonna lie, because I'm like, okay, I still get to see some of my peeps and interact with Gonzaga Twitter in that way. So so yeah, you will still see some Gonzaga content on this feed every once in a while. So hopefully you don't hate it. Hopefully people like it. There you go.
I am sure that they will. Brenna, thank you again. That's going to do it for me today and for this week. Check out the show on wherever you get your podcast. You can also check it out on YouTube as well. Thank you all for listening, and go Zags.